Welcome everyone to the Regen Network Community SDK call. I think probably more people will be trickling in, but don't want to hold up too much as want to just respect everybody's time. Thanks for showing up, and I'll pass the baton over to Corey at this stage to get us moving.
Cool. Should I just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, might as well get through our presentation, and then if people have questions and want to engage, that's great.
All right, sure.
Hi, Vanessa.
Can people see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So we can move through this pretty fast. Yeah, what's new? We can talk a little bit about where things are, at least from the SDK team side when it comes to Stargate. At a high level, the core SDK features are all merged, and there is one last one, our migrate command pull request, which is in review. That's the migrate command from an 039 chain to an 040 chain. The IBC team is looking to be feature complete by end of week. We also have the Big Bang testnet upcoming. So in addition to all of the testnets that are being run by Zaki and the iClusion team, Gregory is leading an effort around a coordinated kind of like multi-chain testnet known as the Big Bang testnet. And yeah, we also have a link here to the Discord channels that are relevant for SDK work, and specifically there's a Stargate Discord channel that you can look at on the Cosmos Discord. And then we can also talk a little bit about where the Regen team has been thinking about what might be coming up after Stargate, which is something that we did touch on in last month's call, but we have a bit more of a refined kind of set of tasks to look at now. So as an overview, again, so with Stargate, the larger main components that we're looking at for this is a complete overhaul of the encoding from amino-based to a protocol buffer-based encoding and serialization format, the introduction of IBC, a single application binary, as opposed to like the Gaia D and Gaia CLI kind of like duo. We now just have one application binary that's being run, and a new kind of test util package for running in-process integration tests, and a corresponding testnet testing framework. So with where things are, as I mentioned before, most everything has been merged except for the migrate command, which is now in review. So since our last call, the main things from the SDK team, the larger pieces that have been now completed are the querier migration. So our gRPC gateway is fully up and running with Swagger generated files for all of the new gRPC based REST endpoints. So there's a single like Swagger endpoint where you can see all of the REST endpoint documentation for both the legacy REST endpoints as well as the new gRPC gateway based REST endpoints. The actual exposure of these Swagger docs is done through a configuration in the app.toml file. So that when you run SIMD, it just like looks at that app.toml file to see if you're going to be exposing Swagger docs, and if so, we'll show them. Protobuf-based addresses have now been migrated from Amino in the base account. That was a large sticking point that Marie and Amari from our team were working on and is now completed. And then also we had a number of tasks to upgrade to the latest Tendermint 034 release candidate. And those are all done now as well. So up next, this current things that we're kind of working on from the core SDK team's perspective are cleaning up the changelog, which is quite large, and preparing release notes. We will then, I think we're shooting for, depending on when IBC is wrapped up with their stuff, either at the end of this week or early next week, whenever those pieces from IBC are done, we will be able to tag a release candidate. Yeah, then we're starting to take a look at upgrading all of the docs we just got a PR merge that actually exposes on docs.cosmos.network multiple versions. So if you go to the path /v0.39, you will see Launchpad documentation. And once we have Stargate published, then once we have an RC published, then you will be able to go to docs.cosmos.network/040 and see a set of Stargate documentation. Master branch will also be still visible as compiled documentation, but the default will be whatever the latest stable version is. And then we've also been starting to think about migration guides. I know that that was something that was discussed on yesterday's multi-entity call, and we've also been talking with Vitwit, who works quite closely with our team at Regen, about potentially taking the lead on those migration guides, since they've been working on the Stargate project with us for quite some time and just have a lot of hands-on context and experience there. So beyond Stargate, we've already started work on migrating the message auth and fee grant work that the Regen team had been doing before the protobuf migration epics, and upgrading that to the new Stargate and protobuf based format. We're also starting to, like the other thing that we immediately will start progress on is on-chain multi-sig and DAO support via the groups module that we had been developing. And so that also needs to get upgraded to Stargate. And then we have a Notions doc, which I can share with the group here, which I would say we're actively kind of starting to seek feedback on for the kinds of things that we're looking at moving forward into the future. Another thing that I would say, because this just came out of our last internal dev meeting that I had, is if Notion is really not your flavor, but you're a bit more active in GitHub, then we do have a whole bunch of issues that are in our project board on GitHub. I can show everyone kind of where those are as well, where we are kind of actively looking for feedback as we prioritize these next set of issues for the group. So I'm going to get out of this presentation and walk through some of the future docs that we've been preparing, as well as the project board where we can see kind of where the upcoming GitHub issues are. But maybe I'll take a pause and just see if there are any questions or comments on the slide deck so far before I do that. Does that seem like a good?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to just see if people have questions about the info so far, and 040 release and Stargate before we move into the beyond Stargate world.
Just maybe a clarification about the migration document. It's going to be released next week. That's what you said?
No, I think that we're probably going to be like starting it at the end of this week. I don't know if, if Anil from Vitwit is on this call. I don't assume that those will take terribly long to do, but just the Vitwit team is also kind of heads down in preparation for the Big Bang testnet. And so it's not like this is the only thing on their plate. What is it in particular that like, so Antoine, I'm not familiar with what project you're coming from. Are you mostly interested in documentation for how to upgrade a module, for how to upgrade a chain, the Cosmos Hub modules?
So far we are on Launchpad 39 version, star name, IOV name service, star name.
Great.
And we are planning to migrate to get ready for Stargate. So far we have seen a PR from Akash, which was actually showing the path to go to Stargate. So for now, we are just looking at for this PR. I mean, we are studying this PR and doing some migration based on this PR.
Yep. I honestly, I do think that while we're still working on the documentation on our side, that it probably is the best place to be looking for that information.
Okay.
And certainly if you have questions, like the team is quite active on Discord. So, I definitely see in the Cosmos SDK public channel, a lot of people asking questions about like, hey, I'm just trying out this thing, but there hasn't been a lot of conversation about people upgrading to Stargate. And so, definitely welcome people going through that process to comment on Discord, and if you're bumping into questions or have problems.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, cheers. Anything else? No, okay. Folks can still see my screen?
Yep.
So first thing I'll take a look at is our Cosmos SDK project board. This is the board that we use for our biweekly iteration planning within the SDK team. There's a lot of columns here, as we're currently, like, GitHub is basically what we are using for project management. So it's not just the individual issues, but we also have a class of meta issues, which correspond to like larger epics that may have a bunch of corresponding sub issues to them. So that's why we do kind of blow things up here to have not just an in progress and a to-do lane, but we also have meta issues in progress, which is those kind of higher level epics that may be in progress for a longer amount of time. And we've recently just upgraded this new column here just next to triage called proposals to review, with a list of issues that we're kind of putting forth as things that we see as like pretty core to some of the future directions we'd like to take the SDK in. Some of them are new features, some of them are improvements or cleaning up of some previous technical debt. And this is definitely, I think, if you're a developer and you're actively involved in the SDK and like have things to say about the way that stuff is laid out, the access to different modules that you have and whatnot, like this is going to be a good place to look. And I think like right now is the time when we're actively starting to encourage conversations here. So yeah, everyone kind of sees where this is. Cosmos SDK projects 40, and it's this proposals to review column is specifically where you can comment on that. And the other place is this Notion document, which we have created within the Regen team. And I can also post a link to that directly in the chat.
Maybe post a link to the project board in GitHub too.
Yep. And so for this Notion board, we've started to lay out what we think might be a set of things at a super high level, super rough set of like priorities and high level epics that the Regen team thinks would be valuable work to be working on the Cosmos SDK, like in terms of like post Stargate pieces. We bucketed those into a number of different themes, which are the kind of color-coded tags that you'll see here. And I think it's easier if I just sort of call out by name the different themes so that people are hearing them and kind of get an understanding of what these components are. The first one is around governance. This is a piece that the ICF has been particularly excited about for some time. They're quite encouraged to just see more on-chain funding happening in the Cosmos Hub and in general in Cosmos-based blockchains. And so there's a suite of work, and we're corresponding that with a theme of epics here that correspond to greater on-chain governance functionality. The first kind of component to that is the addition of this groups module, which I had mentioned in the deck, but other components of that work will correspond with, like later into next year, there are some items that we'd like to look into around flexible deposit amounts, flexible quorum periods, variable denomination requests and payouts for how the actual on-chain governance works. There's also a feature around permanent locked vesting accounts, which Regen requires for its own chain. We have in our own design for Regen Network, we have the requirement that a large proportion of tokens are actually not tradable permanently and only used for governance voting. And so this is meant to be a piece that kind of like enables that. But at a high level, that's this kind of like governance theme that we're talking about. A second one is around key management. Key management is a pretty important piece that it shouldn't be any like surprise to folks in the ecosystem that it's something we're wanting to focus on, and has had like kind of a lot of active discussion. Billy posted a piece on key and fee management on the Cosmos forum, I know a couple weeks ago, that was getting some activity as well. So we're like closely listening to that, and then also wanting to make sure that we wrap up and publish into the SDK the work that we had already started at the beginning of this year around fee granting and message authorization, which are sort of big components to what will enable fee delegation, and also together with the groups module, more kind of easy key recovery systems. And then we've also added some epics specifically around generic key rotation for validator operators or for any accounts more generally. Those are kind of the two higher level feature themes that we're kind of bucketing work into for the SDK. And then the next set of things are more about improvements to existing infrastructure. At a high level, they bucket into improved token support, which is corresponding to a number of different issues here. So there's some on improving the bank module and cleaning up the way that that works. There are some around working more closely with the NFT working group. I don't know if that specifically is corresponding to an epic here, but it's something that we're definitely wanting to do, is stay close to that work that Sean is coordinating, and making sure that like any of the things that come out of their research is able to get folded in pretty seamlessly into the SDK, and that the infrastructure that we're providing when it comes to the bank module or otherwise is meeting the needs of NFTs in the Cosmos ecosystem. And then the other piece that's kind of infrastructural layer is around storage improvements. So for this, I think at a high level, the way to think about how we're wanting to improve storage in the SDK is about adding secondary indices as one component to the Cosmos SDK, and a more generic kind of ORM module or table store to the Cosmos SDK in the form of a submodule. But then also together with that, adding state caching and the ability to read directly from something akin to a Postgres database blockchain state in a versioned way, and potentially even later down the line with proof support. That's a piece that we've been collaborating with the team at Vulcanize DB on. They've actually received, I believe, a separate contract from the ICF to be working on integrating Vulcanize and a lot of the work that Vulcanize does with the Cosmos ecosystem. And we've been working directly with Ian Norden from their team to get some of these more core pieces to the Cosmos SDK kind of like roped into our roadmap. And then the last two themes that we're thinking about bucketing pieces into for work as it pertains to this kind of board is general protobuf improvements. So improvements to the Cosmos SDK protobuf like encoding system that we've now built and merged in as of Stargate. And then some tickets around specifically deciding on what constitutes a Cosmos SDK version 1.0. This is something that everyone's kind of looking to in the distance. Like, we would like to get to a stable 1.0 version of the SDK, but yeah, that's definitely going to require not just some decisions and some like a lot of active thinking from the core team, but also some engagement from the community around what sort of constitutes a stable API that people are ready to kind of get behind and say, this is where we're drawing the line. Yeah, so this is a document which is public. I don't think that like on this call right now, it makes sense to like hear every single thing from every single person in terms of feedback, but it is shared with comments turned on. So, we definitely are wanting to welcome feedback from the broader Cosmos community in whichever way is best suited to your needs. So for some people, if that means going onto this board and commenting on individual issues and saying, hey, this ticket is really important for my team, we'd really love to see this prioritized in a different way, feel free to use the Notion document in that way. But similarly, if the GitHub kind of format of commenting directly on these high-level proposals to review is more your style, we're very welcome to engaging with you like in that kind of arena equally. So that's where things are at from our side. Yeah, I don't know if there are any pieces that I missed. I know that we have both Gregory and Aaron from our team on the call here as well. So just I would first ask if either of you have anything else that you'd like to add to the way that we're thinking about work in the post Stargate world. You can do that now, and then we can turn it over to kind of open questions.
I don't have anything to add. That was a great overview, Corey. Thanks.
I don't have anything to add either.
Yeah, and I would love to see if people that have joined the call have questions that we could discuss live here. And I see actually in the chat that Ethan had a question.
I don't want to go into too much detail because Corey just said not to. My question is about 1.0. There will never be a final version of the SDK. And 1.0 does not mean end of software. It has been seen generally like treated like that. There's 1.0, then 1.12, and then there's a 2.0. All that 1.0 really means is there'll be a series of releases without API breaking changes on enhancements, and we can trust that for maybe 6 months before 1 year until 2.0 comes out, which will have them. But that means that not every release will have breaking changes as they have been doing until now. It gives a little more consistency and then adding versions. So my question is about that. So there's just been, long before you got involved, Aaron, a fear of 1.0 in the SDK team. And I think you have done an amazing job bringing this much, much closer with protobuf, with the idea of backwards compatibility in a lot of the message formats you've been using. I think it's a really awesome job you've been doing. And I would be curious to hear any thinking on how much is needed in the core to get to a 1.0 where many of these other features like the ORM, the group modules, the better governance stuff can be added on top of a 1.0 in a backwards compatible way. And say, so I'm wondering what your thinking is on that, basically.
Yeah, I can share my thinking, but I would preface that by saying that I think the definition of 1.0 definitely needs to be a community process, and that other stakeholders need to be aligned. But from my perspective, what would constitute a 1.0 is a stabilization of some of the core protobuf message types. We currently put all the types into a beta category. I think most essentially the transaction, the TX prototypes need to be stabilized at V1. And then I would also like the other big thing that feels like it's sort of a gating thing is a stable app module interface, which is simple and kind of is aligned with all the protobuf changes we have. The app module interface currently is kind of a hybrid of the legacy Amino app module and some of the new things we've been adding for protobuf. So those are two things. And then I guess I want to see how the community responds to the current release, and to see if there's any sort of major changes that we want to make. For instance, one thing that came pretty late in Stargate is that we transitioned from using bytes for addresses to strings so that we get base32 in at the protocol level. There might be other small things like that end up having a pretty wide effect in terms of how we do things generally. But in my mind, 1.0 should just be what defines 1.0 should be a very minimal basic interface for defining modules that allows us to work towards a more modular SDK where, there's a small core and then lots of stuff added on top.
I have a question regarding that. Hi, Alexis speaking. This is a pain point, right? Ethan nailed it. So I think it's a very good plan for 1.0, and I agree. But can we like target a roadmap so that at least we know how we could get there? But this is only one of the 2 points to touch base with. You said we need to convince the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? I'm asking because maybe you know, I don't. What are the stakeholders that we should try to convince? Thanks.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, regarding who are the stakeholders, I think, you know, technically from a governance standpoint, it's, besides Regen, it's All in Bits, who, you know, you're currently, as I understand it, the main representative, and then Bez, who, as I understand it, is representing Interchain GmbH. So I think that those are, like, from a governance standpoint, the stakeholders. But obviously, there are lots of other stakeholders who are not part of those groups whose voices I think are important.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sold, by the way, for the record. So, I've been beating this drum for quite some time to try to get to 1.0. And anyway, thank you very much.
I mean, I think we would appreciate feedback on in the issues in terms of what you know, if people comment, maybe we need an issue on GitHub where people can comment on what they think is 1.0 and what the roadmap is to that. We do have a card in our Notion that we shared, and we'd appreciate feedback there. And it is something that we are seeing in our 2021 roadmap. I'm not sure, like, if it's first quarter or, you know, later in the year, but.
Aaron, I think, yes, I totally agree. And I tell you that there is an important stakeholder we didn't mention before. And I think this actually caused some friction in the past to release SDK 1.0 was the lack of a Tendermint 1.0, Tendermint Core 1.0. So maybe that is the stakeholder we should try to convince.
Right, if we had a Tendermint 1.0.
Yeah, many objected in the past. It wouldn't make sense to have a Cosmos SDK 1.0 that depends on something which is not yet 1.0. It's just an idea, of course.
You know, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's a good point. I would note, though, that most of the modules sit pretty far above ABCI. And, you know, even if there are some big changes in ABCI that affect base app and the anti-handlers, the core way that we define a module is mostly, I think, unaffected by that. So maybe it's not a dependency necessarily.
I see, makes sense. Thanks.
Cool, you're welcome.
I think it's a great idea to have a specific GitHub issue about, similar to the Notion ticket, about 1.0, and maybe socialize that in a couple channels and get people's feedback as just one step in the process at this stage. Now that we sort of have our heads up enough to have the conversation, I think that'd be a great next step.
Cool, I'll create an issue right after this call. And yeah, and then I would rely on other people to share it in relevant channels. Maybe I'll reach out to you and Corey, and ping Alessio, to the people that commented.
Well, it looks like we're just coming up at the 30-minute mark. We usually try to keep these calls crisp. So unless anybody has anything burning to share or to ask, I think we should probably conclude today's call. And, you know, please engage with the Notion and the GitHub issues board with questions, comments, and, you know, input. I think this call has a pretty great representation of different community users, so we would absolutely love everybody's feedback and thinking here. So yeah, thanks so much for coming to the call. Corey, Aaron, do you have any closing remarks?
Just that we're still, you know, exploring kind of what the best format is for this call. So any feedback or comments on what was useful or not useful, or if we went too fast or too slow, or if the slides were better than the Notion walkthroughs, or you'd like one kind of format more emphasized than another. feedback welcome in Discord. Please chime in and yeah, let us know if this was useful.
Yeah, I would just say I appreciate everybody joining. I'm hopeful that, you know, I appreciate actually having some of these discussions with other people in the community, and I would appreciate getting some more time to do that next time. I think that is really valuable.
And I just want to say I forgot to ping everybody the last couple. I just shared a Google Doc with a proposed agenda for people to add things. We didn't really get people adding things, which I think is why I forgot to do it this time. But we can keep doing that. And I think having these larger topics, for instance, if next month we want to revisit, you know, the 1.0 ticket, and, you know, Aaron's going to have that up on GitHub. If people want to get in and have conversation about it, I think we should put it as an agenda item to say, we're going to have a 15-minute conversation about that, or whatever, verbally, or whatever other things are important for this community to engage with. So I'll do my best to sort of pre-socialize an agenda beforehand, but that would be, that's at least a candidate for how this call kind of can function, where we can have a monthly rhythm of just talking about the major issues coming up amongst the user community of the SDK. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for coming, and see you on the interwebs.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Keep up the good work, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.